Okay. Good morning, everyone. Buon dia a todos. Buongiorno a tutti. It's a great pleasure to welcome you to this international lecture on 15 Secret organized within the graduate program in legal science of the State University of Northern Paraná. My name is Dmitro Slenko, and I have a pleasure of serving the chair of today's session. Today, we address one of the most urgent challenges for our time: femicide and violence against women through cultural, legal, and criminological lenses. I would also like to extend a special welcome to everyone joining us online through the PPHD ONP YouTube channel. And one quick practical note: at the end of the conference, the attendance form will be shared in the chat by a member of the organized team. Please remember to fill it in so your participation can be registered. For those following us online, please feel free to leave your question and comments in the chat. Uh, Before introduction our distinguished guest, I would like also to introduce my colleagues who will join me in moderating today's discussion. First of all, Dr. Katerina Slenko. Katerina Slenko holds a PhD in law and is a visiting professor at ONP. She is a Ukrainian legal scholar whose research focuses on human rights and the protection of vulnerable groups, particularly women and children, with special attention to armed conflict, forced displacement, and gender-based violence. Katerina, it's a pleasure to have you with us, so moderator of today's discussion. I'm also pleased to introduce our next moderator, Dr. Professor Bruna Azevedo de Castro from ONP. Her academic work in criminal law spans research, teaching extension, study and supervision, internalization, and academic management, with particular emphasis on concrete, measurable outcomes for the university and its academic programs. During today's session, Bruna also could help us with question comments coming from our online audience. Dr. Professor, thank you very much for joining us today. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our distinguished guest from Italy, Professor Maria Antonella Pasculi. Professor Pasculi is Associated Professor of Criminal Law and Criminology at the University of Bari Alda Moro. She has extensive experience in teaching and academic research in the field of criminal law and criminology, and her work addresses important contemporary questions concerning criminal justice, gender-based violence, and the protection of fundamental rights. Her lecture also offers an important opportunity for dialogue between European and Latin American experiences, particularly concerning the prevention of violence against women and the effectiveness of legal and institutional responses. Dear Professor Pasculi, it's a great pleasure and honor to welcome you to 15th Secret at ONP. Title of her lecture, Barbablù and Femicide, Cultural, Juridical, and Criminological Reflection on Crimes Against Women. Professor Pasculi, we are delighted to have you with us today. The floor is yours.
My honor and my pleasure to be here. In Italy is a sunny summer, but I would like to share my first presentation on this topic because I spent many years of my life in studying and researching crimes against women and femicide. But thanking to this excellent professor, thanking to this great discussant, I would like to share my presentation on cultural and literature profile of femicide in a famous fairy tale called Bluebird. I choose voluntarily the Italian words Barbablù, because when I was a child, I used to listen to this fairy tale on the turntable. There are no podcasts, and I was so scared when I listened to this history that I was always close to my grandmother. And this is a tale story that conditioned my life and my great love for criminal profiles. So I'll show you in the first part the cultural and criminological profile of Bluebird, and in the second one, in the second part, I illustrated the juridical aspect of violence against women and femicide. Finally, the new legislation present in Italy and comparing Latin country. So, as you know, you can leave for this first part on the first free slide. And so this is a famous picture that illustrates Bluebird, Charles Perrault fairy tale written in 1687, maybe a representation of Henry VI, King of England, or a famous, it's famous to be a killer of his wives, but politically not only handily. And I don't know that's Brazilian or the public present, online present, know the history, but I would like to start with the history. Bluebird is a wealthy and powerful nobleman who has been married 6 times to beautiful women who have all mysterious vanished. You can stop here. And this is a objective data that we know, perfectly know, at the beginning of a fairy tale. Bluebird married 6 women by they mysteriously vanished. And when he visited his neighbor and asked to marry one of his daughter, all neighbors are terrified. After hosting a wonderful banquet, the youngest girl decides to be his wife and goes to live with him in the rich and luxurious palace in countryside, away from her family. Bluebird announces he must leave for the country and gives the palace key to his wife. She is able to open any room with them, each which contain all of riches, except one. And this is an underground chamber that he strictly forbids to visit or to enter. And after these advertisements, he then goes away, leaving the palace and the key in her hands. And she's very happy. She invites her sister Anne as friend, as cousin for a party. But however, during this party, she is eventually overcome with the desire to see the secret room halls, and she sneaks away from the party and ventures into it. She immediately discovered that the room is flooded with flow, and the murder cups of Bluebird's previous 6 wives hanging on books from the wall. I perfectly remember the picture on my child book, and it was very terrified. Horrified, she drops the key in the blood and flees the room. She tries to wipe the blood stain off the key, but the key is magic and the stain cannot be removed. Blue bird unexpectedly return and find the bloody keys. He immediately understand what's happened, and without speaking, he communicated to kill her. And so she perfectly understand what is happening. And but she asked one desire before dying, and this desire is to pray with her sister Anne. And then, as Bluebird is about to deliver the fatal blow, Anne and his brother arrived and killed him. And the wife inherits his fortune and castle, and has 6 dead wives laid to rest. She used the fortune to have her siblings married, then remarried herself, finally moving on from the horror of her time with the Bluebird. This is the a synthesis of the history, but now I'll point out the psychological and criminological meanings present in this story, to compare with the dynamic of domestic violence and femicide that we can discover in all profile. So first of all, first step, the forbidden room, that represent curiosity and unknown. The locked room represents something we are told not to see or to know. The key gives the wife access to truth. And the story asks an important questions. Is curiosity dangerous, or is discovering the truth necessary? Yes, her curiosity is what put her in danger, but it's also what reveals Barbablù through nature. And so it's very important in dynamic of relationship. As a feminist criminologist, I discover in my interview with abused woman that many times the woman don't want to understand what's happened. They prefer to hide them the truth. And the second step in the criminological analysis is represented by the figure, the character of Bluebird, who represents hidden danger. Because Bluebird initially, in the fairy tale, appears wealthy, powerful, respectable. His terrifying secrets show that the appearance can be deceptive. And the fairy tale could therefore be interpreted as a warning about people who see charming and powerful, but concerning something dangerous. And so many times we prefer a fashionable woman, a fashionable people, without understand who the imagine can be hide. And so I suggest, of course, to read the famous novel by Oscar Wilde, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which is a representation of a schizophrenic way to interpret the life or the criminal behavior. Third step, the key, who represent the knowledge. And the key is one of the most important symbols. Once the wife has seen what is behind the door, she cannot return to ignorance. And so the blood and the key also represents the fact that discovering the truth has consequence. And so the key can symbolize knowledge, forbidden truth, curiosity, independence. Maybe why this is important? This is important because many times women in domestic violence, in domestic relationship, prefer the ignorance on the opposite of the truth. Throughout the key, it's possible to to be aware of danger, to knowledge the treatment, the bad behavior, the terrible manners. And so the blood that cannot be removed is the fruit that leaves a mark. And so in our life, we can accept the consequence of the fruit, of the knowledge in intimate relationship. The wife tried to clean the cave, but the blood cannot be removed. And symbolically, they suggest that once we discover a terrible truth, we cannot simply forget it. Knowledge changes us. And so, and the modern psychologist, this story regards on power and control by man on the human, and Blueboard established an absolute rule. In fact, she said to his wife, "You may enter everywhere except here." He expects his wife to obey without questions. From a modern perspective, this can be interpreted as a story about control, coercion, and abuse within a relationship. And the forbidden room became a symbol of the secrets maintained by someone who wants complete control over another person. So you can share another slide. And so before a right to oxyricide or femicide, we are the basis of pyramid of gender-based crime that start in the common relationship. And the women prefer not to know the secrets maintained by someone. In this case, the wife is not simply disobedient, because it represents a patriarchal system we live and we know, in which the wife should have obeyed her husband. But a modern interpretation can be almost the opposite. Her curiosity saves her life. If she had never opened the door, she would never have discovered what Bluebird was capable of. So the story can be read as a warning that blind obedience can be dangerous when someone is hiding something from you. And so you can start with another slide. The deeper psychological meaning. There is no equality in violence between capable. And at a psychological level, the locked room can represent the dark secret inside another person or inside ourselves. So in the fairy tale, Blueboard say, there is something you must never see. So this is happen in the domestic violence and the patriarchal system when the common opinion said, oh, it's not important to prosecute femicide, but the violence is always present. There's no difference between an homicide of woman and homicide of man. There are the same rules, the same law, but there is a different interpretation. The fairy tale is about also the difficult passage from innocence of child, of female children, the curiosity of female adolescents, and the knowledge of adult life. And finally, unfortunately, for many women, the dangerous way of marriage and the possibility of survival. In this case, the wife begins as someone who doesn't know the truth, but it ends as someone who has seen it and survived. The law of feminicide has been enacted in Italy on last November 2025. We are a civil law country, the country of legality principle, of constitutional principle, of the respect of women rights, but we spend many discussion, political and juridical, on the irrelevance of crimes as femicide, because the patriarchal system is all over. And so when in the second part, I show you the difference between in Latin American countries, we can find law on femicide more than European country. And now I would like to continue in explanation of criminological perspective of Bluebird. Certainly, from a criminological perspective, Bluebird can be read as an early fictionary representation of serial killer, better, of serial intimate partner homicide, who has coercive control, who use victim vulnerability and approach the concealment of offending. As we know, Bluebird is a serial intimated partner offender. And so when we compare the history of Ted Bundy to Bluebird, of the modern form of serial killer, we can find a repeated pattern. He marries women and they kill them for 6 times. So there are a lot of warning for the society, also for the wife. His crimes are therefore not an isolated act of violence, but a recurrent pattern. And criminologically, this makes his resemble as a serial offender whose victims are people whom he has an intimate relationship. When we discuss in Italy about the introduction of stalking as patriarchal system, we say, but stalking is not a crime of public officer when a girl or a woman presents a complaint to public officer describing the repeat of stalking behavior. Official, police, sometimes judge said, but he loves you. It's a form of love bombing, not a crime. There is no legality, no taxativity. But after this complaint, after maybe 5 or 6 months, the girl or the woman has been killed by the same man who loves too much. So the important point is that the murders occur within a relationship that initially appears legitimate and socially acceptable. This is a female stereotype that I would like to explain in my next point of a presentation, the contrast between public image and private behavior. Yes, before to arrive to legal framework of EU provision. And so while the men have one rule, you have to obey me. The women are attracted by the power. And so Bluebird is wealthy, socially respectable, is more attractive as an husband, is rich. And this is criminologically significant because a serious offender not necessarily conform to the stereotype to a visible dangerous criminal according to Lombrosian theory. The tale emphasizes the distinction between public person, respectable, wealthy, powerful, and the private behavior, controlling violent murderers. So this is what's happened in our life. Now I show you the better aspect of me. Maybe I was not a good person. That's happening in the common relationship. But when the public image is a scheme to cover criminal behavior or antisocial behavior, that's the question. And so this is evident in this fairy tale. This is evident from criminological point of view, and this is relevant to the study of domestic violence when the perpetrator may appear perfectly respectable to people outside the relationship. When the girl or the woman or the wife complain or denounce the criminal acts in domestic violence, many times public officer or judge or public prosecutor said, but he's a good person. That's a good person. And another perspective is a coercive control. Bluebird established a very clear rule of completely obey. And the prohibition is more than a simple instruction. It establishes a relationship in which Bluebird has the power to determine what his life can know and do. From a contemporary criminological and psychological perspectives, this can be interpreted as a coercive control, but domination achieves through rules, restriction, intimidation, and control rather than physical violence alone. And its regards and include also the power of information. The wife doesn't know what is in the secret room, as the husband to decide the power of knowledge. For the reason we have two key of knowledge. And from a procedural criminological perspective, we can analyze the concealment of the crime. So the bodies of previous wives are hidden in the private room, and we know this at the beginning of the fairy tales. This is an important from a criminological standpoint because Bluebird attempts to maintain his respectable identity by concealing the evidence of his crimes. And the room function almost like a crime scene, the first crime scene in fairy tales. And therefore, this is my favorite, of course, fairy tales. And that offender has deliberately removed from public view. The discovery of the room represents the transition from hidden crime and discovered crime and exposure of offender. And with the first time we talk about the special victimology that illustrate an asymmetric power present in the marriage, in the patriarchal system. And this can be interpreted throughout the concept of victim awareness. The victim recognizes that something is inconsistent between Bluebird apparent identity and his behavior, but unfortunately the woman doesn't want to know the real process of knowledge, and the danger already exists, and her discovery reveals it. And we found for the first crime of the perspective of we can read the fairy tale from the perspective of victimology. This is a special field in the criminological area. And so this created an information asymmetry, because Bluebird knows his history. He's a criminal, he kills his wife, but the wife does not. Bluebird controls the information. The wife must decide how much she can trust him. So we have also the contrast between trust and love, trust and power. And so the trust is on the basis of legal bond, as marriage, as intimate relationship. We don't know, we don't understand, we can interpret it. Why does Bluebird kill? And so we have no explanation. And so in the same case, we have no explanation for femicide. For this reason, we need to enact the rules to understand what's happened. And we can see that throughout legal framework of European provision, as well as the Legal Convention of Istanbul. And that is present in a part of fairy tales. And I will ask, but I can hear the answer. What's the rules of society in this case, in the intimate violence system, in femicide system, in the serial killer system? The broader and interventional third part represent the influence, the support of social institution, because the wife cannot defeat Bluebird alone. Her brothers intervene and stop him. This can be interpreted as the importance of social support and external intervention in situation of interpersonal violence. I can examine this part in the last part of my presentation. The victim's isolation is broken when other people became aware of the danger. For this reason, in the modern times, this could symbolize the role of family, friends, policies, social service, courts, other protective institution. And so after the fairy tale, I can show you how it's important, the relevant influence of politics, of law, and especially why we study the international criminal effects, the sociological profiles of femicide. And before arriving to the last directive, I would like to emphasize how femicide is unfortunately not a new phenomenon. Despite femicide gravity, most states crucially lack of specific legislation criminalizing crimes. And there are not existing law, or maybe existing law often fails to capture and address the misogynistic underpinnings of violence against human. Similarly, international law also lacks explicit provision on femicide. And this gap reflects the field's historical difficulties in translating the protection of human rights. And so the topic of femicide in international law is both timely and crucial, because femicide is a pervasive global issue that reveals the severe violence that all women face solely due to their gender. And the issue of violence against women, we can go with the slide. I can see the convention, or maybe the optional protocol to the Convention on the Elimination of All Form of Discrimination Against Women, the CEDAW, and the recent approval by the European Parliament of the Directive 2024-1385. I repeat the number, 1385, which calls for stronger laws on combating violence against women and domestic violence. In my opinion, at first glance, it may appear that sufficient laws have been enacted both nationally and internationally to protect women's rights. That's true. But the critical question remains, how are they enforced? Human rights, in fact, continues to face significant obstacles worldwide, often shaped by an entrenched gender stereotype and patriarchal attitude towards women's roles in society. And for this reason, we can continue for the subsequent step on understanding femicide. The term femicide, yes, I probably all of us know, has deep historical roots with early variants of these words in France, Italy, and United States. In Italy, all criminal professors, except 3 persons, me and another 2 professors, deeply hate the term femicide as a translation by English term feminicide, and so femicidio is not a good term for a pure linguistic term. Yes, but we can practice criminal law to be a linguistic to have a linguistic approach. We practice criminal law to save the life, to protect human rights, to protect person, to live in a civil world. And so the sociologist Diane Russell mentioned it for the first time at 1976 International Tribunal on Crimes Against Women in Brussels, Belgium. This is an interesting report of a 4 days conference on March 1976 in Brussels, in which people, maybe almost 500 women from every country in this world, developing country, civilized country, discuss and provided for a report on the female condition, from abortion to homicide, from sexual abuse to professional life. So this is a very interesting book. I suggest to leave it. You can find in English or Italian version. Maybe I think it was translated in all languages. This is an experimental conference that was not repeat. I think in the 17th we were almost more feminist than us, more protective of women than us. A decisive movement for the diffusion of the term in feminist discourse was the publication of Russell and Redford 1992 book Femicide, The Politics of Woman Killing, in which the authors define femicide as misogynistic killing of women by men as the most extreme manifestation of continual violence against women. And for Russell and Bradford, naming the crime as a femicide was the key of acknowledging it as a political matter, not private issues, does require intervention by public institution. Italian professor don't understand this because they consider the femicide a reply of the crimes of homicide. But for the first time, the crimes of homicide in criminal Italian code present the reason of a crime. The man kill woman because of their gender. It's the first time we have the reason of the crime. That's not present in the simple homicide. You can share with the slide. While primary focusing on male perpetrate femicide, the term can encompass killings committed or facilitated by women that are motivated by misogynist. And so for I show you the contents of this directive that's towards gender equality in all countries, civil law country and developing country, preventing and combating violence against women and domestic violence throughout the European Union. And so we can find in the second one slide the research of minimum level of protection across the Europe and that are no present before this moment. And what's the main feature present in this directive? So we can find the minimum terms of imprisonment for the serious offenses, and this directive sets jurisdictional rules for offenses committed also online. This is the first time that's it's happened. Help to ensure the protection of victim and the access to justice. And so you can share the slide and we can find the part of this directive. And so the importance of these relative documents. And so you can find with the femicide meanings, femicide or feminicide is the term of murdering a woman often because of their gender. This is the first challenger that we find in this directive and the Italian system. Femicide can be perpetrated by other sex, but is most often committed by women. And so we have some statistical data. In Italy, it's too much news about femicide. That's incredible because we are a civil law. We have the respect of gender, constitutional guarantee by the Article 3 and constitutional written and approved in 1948. So it's very difficult. I show you the criminological example, which is possible to talk about femicide. That is very different by the simple homicide. You can understand the murder of a woman as a result of intimate pattern violence, as Bluebird's fairy tale teach. The torture or misogynist slaying a woman, the killing of women and girls in the name of honor. So this is very famous in southern country, and so that's happened in southern Italy, maybe also in northern Italy now. So as well as in other parts of the world, genital mutilation related deaths, accusation of witchcraft. So the first image regards the famous case law, Gonzalez and Otter, Cattonfield versus Mexico on 11 December 2009. in which Inter-American Court decision sets a precedent for Mexico, and this reason regarding the legal interpretation of this kind of extreme violence present in the history. And so I suggest to students, to the public, to read the Inter-American Court of Human Rights decision for a profile of preliminary objection, merits, reparation, and cost. And so, as Bluebird teach on 16 November 2009, the Inter-American Court delivered its judgment declaring the Mexican state liable intentionally for the disappearance and subsequent death of the 3 young women in Ciudad de Juárez. What's the main point of this decision? The main point is the gender profile, and the gender profile is a contextual analysis incorporating the gender perspective, the discrimination, and the violence against the woman. And the first time we have an enrichment of the standard of due diligence because I remember, as happens in the Bluebird history, the 3 girl vanished on Friday afternoon, on Friday night. The mothers goes to the institutional or policies to said that the girls come not back to at home, but the police officer decide not to investigate because the girls loves to have funny, and so they spend their times with the boys. Maybe they drinks, maybe they have fun with drugs, so they didn't start immediately the investigation, even if 1 or 3 girls was underage. The girls was fined 3 days on the Monday without, of course, killed and abused, sexually abused, and so this is the reason for which this decision is relevant, because the court for the first time applied the gender perspective and starting the development of the rich case law on reparation with a gender perspective that transforming the vocational role of Inter-American case law. Who are the victims? So I spend a lot because I talk, and so my time is finished. The profile of victim. They were very young women between the age of 15 and 25, students, migrants, worker. And so there are a lot of people that vanished in the period. Secondly, a sizable number of these femicide were accompanied by sign of sexual violence. And finally, the lack of clarification, the irregularity in investigation after the disappearance. What is important? Femicide is a crime against all humanity. And so this is my final part of my presentation. After the cultural and criminological profile, the directive and the decision, it's important to follow. It's first of all, and so I don't stop to say this to my students, to my friends, to all people I met for job or for profession. Domestic violence is a crime, not a private issue. It's against the law. It's not a private matter. If you committed a crime in your home, it's still a crime for which we can prosecute. And so we can find this question during the COVID pandemic era. The second one, addressing gender-based violence means imposing ideas and values into other culture. So I'm not proud of this, because Italy is a mafia country. Italy is a mafia country, but it's also the country who fight against mafia type association better of all the other country. And so I find that in the Latin country, I find more law to protect women than European country. Gender-based violence exists in every country, culture, and community, and governments around the world have outlawed most acts of gender-based violence. And finally, the problem of a sign of consent and activity. So the idea that the rape can be justified for for female behavior or not sexual consent. So this is a terrifying profile of victimology that BS cancel. And so finally, I finish my presentation, and I hope you understand all my idea to protect the human and the female rights in this femicide analysis of fairy tale of criminological step and the European directive. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Pasculi, for this rich and thought-provoking presentation. Your lecture has shown very clearly that femicide cannot be understood only as an individual criminal act. It requires us to consider the interaction between criminal law, institutional responses, cultural patterns, and other. I also found particularly valuable the comparative dimension of your presentation, connecting European and Latin American legal approaches, some decisions of Latin American court, and other information, other directives for European Union, and so on. Thank you for giving us such a strong basis for this discussion. Now I would like to invite Katerina and Bruna to join for our discussion. And we have a technical problem with hearing for Professor Pasculi, but we could write a question in chat, and we could start. Maybe Professor Katerina could brief comments or question, and then we could send the
Thank
professor.
you for the questions, dear Professor Katrina. There are, I have to speak for a long time. I would invited you in the seminar of my PhD course to explain the difference maybe present in the war crimes or international crimes and gender crimes. I think that femicide emphasized the gender profiles. On the opposite, the gender profile is present in international crime, war crimes, crimes against humanity, but the darkness that shock humanities prevails on gender profile. This is my reason. So there are, as maybe international crimes as well as crimes against humanity or war crimes against women is the general, is the genus crimes, while the femicide is a specific crime. So we say genus and species in our criminal system.
Thank you so much, dear Professor. I always, you always give for us some energy. Very interesting lecture. So I think that it's particularly important questions when the armed conflicts that we have now in Ukraine, and very important to criminalize the femicide in Ukraine.
Thank you, Bruno, Professor Bruno, Dr. Bruno, for the questions. This is a common debate present in Italy. The reason for which we don't like the crimes of femicide is the explanation of this crime, the patriarchal attitude, the cultural attitude present in Italy, as well as in southern Italy, in which the man prevails on the woman. It's true. For example, at Spain, for example, has invest many euros, many millions of euros as political and European level to create an legal system education to improve the gender gap. And so that's very interesting because they are cultural reform and legal approach to the crimes against women. So I think that there are both perspective and both challengers we have to persecute. But in Italy, I think the cultural schemes are too much, as it's impossible to destroy, to cancel mafia. In the same times, it's impossible to destroy, to eliminate the gender gap at the cultural attitude. I think, in my experience, in my job, in my opinion, that man thinks to be better than woman at professional level, at cultural level. So I breath this inequality, asymmetric relationship present. Maybe it's more simple to introduce the law. So we need to have to be repressive against women who kill men who kill a woman, because it's more simple than educated men to be equal than women.
Thank you very much for
This is
this
my opinion. I perfectly know Italian system.
Dear Professor Bruno, are you satisfied for response? Maybe any comments?
Yes, thank you, Professor Dimitru, Professor Katerina. Professor Katerina would like to continue to talk.
Sorry.
Just finish what you were saying.
We could finish. Thanks so much for dear professors, especially Professor Maria Antonella.
Say to everybody at the next time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear Professor. I think today's discussion has highlighted an important point. An effective response to femicide cannot depend exclusively on punishment after violence has already occurred. Final words, conclude. I would like to express our sincere gratitude to Professor Maria Antonella Pasculi for this excellent lecture and for sharing her research and reflection with us. I would like also to thank Professor Dr. Bruno Azevedo de Castro, Professor Dr. Katerina Slinko for joining for our today discussion. My thanks also go to the PPHD ONP team, the organizer of 15th Circuit, and of course to all professors, researchers, students, and participants who join us here and online. Meetings such as this one strengthen academic cooperation and create opportunity for further dialogue, research, and joint initiatives between Brazil, Italy, and Europe. For Professor Maria Antonella Pasculi, grazie mille. We sincerely hope to welcome you again at OMP in the future. Thank you very much for everyone. Muito obrigado and have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much, Professor Dimitru, Professor Katerina, our students, and the staff. I'd like to greet all the professors and the staff who are responsible for organizing this great event. We have some technical problems here with Professor Antonella. para nossos alunos que estão aí, né, no chat, agora em português mesmo, porque a professora Antonella teve alguns problemas, ela não estava nos escutando, tá? Só para... Porque aqui foi um problema de bastidor e não foi esclarecido para todos que estão nos ouvindo ao vivo pelo YouTube. A professora Antonella não estava nos escutando, né? Embora nós estivéssemos escutando normalmente, por isso que nós formulamos as perguntas no chat. E aí também por isso que ela respondeu uma atrás da outra e não estava nos ouvindo, enquanto a professora Caterina estava falando, ela já foi respondendo a minha pergunta, porque ela não estava nos escutando, tá bem? Por isso que ela saiu rapidamente da sala, também não fazia sentido, ela não estava ouvindo a gente aqui, falando com ela, dialogando com ela. Foram problemas técnicos, acontece, né? Mas, muito obrigada, thank you, professors.
Sim, muito obrigada, professora. Professora, é muito importante para falar sobre esse tópico relevante, importante na todo mundo, no Brasil, na Europa, e para comparar também melhor práticas e melhor leis com professores europeus e latino-americanos. Muito obrigada a todos, participantes, professores. Have a nice day.
Tenha um ótimo dia para todos.
Bom dia, pessoal.